All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy O'Sullivan. I am the superintendent for the National Park Service Chesapeake office. We are here today for the second of two offerings for the Chesapeake Bay Gateways and Water Trails Network grant submission workshop. So we've been holding a series of workshops about our new grant offering. This workshop will have a piece of the workshop that provides a snapshot of our office and an overview of what the grant offering is. But the bulk of the focus of this session will be on actually applying to the grants and digging down into the nuts and bolts of the different steps. And we'll walk through a checklist with you and really give some tips on putting your application together. So first, we'll just get started with a little background. Next slide. So just to remind ourselves on the different dates that are that have passed and are coming up. Today, we're here right now for the grant writing workshop. So really learning on how to apply to the NPS Chesapeake Gateway grants. Like I said, this is the second offering. The deadline to apply is January 30th, 2023. And then as we arc into the new year, we'll be setting up additional network sessions and topics that are technical assistance support. And then arcing into the new year, we're going to be looking to set a date and plan for a Chesapeake Gateways Network annual gathering. So a way to bring all of our partners together. We haven't done it in many years and are looking forward to planning that with you all. Next slide. Okay, so we always start here with a map of the Chesapeake watershed, just to really ground ourselves in the scope of what both the grants are focused on and what the Office for the NPS Chesapeake's range of our work is. We do support the full watershed, so the full 41 million acre watershed from upstate New York down to the Virginia Tidewaters. And really this area, the watershed itself is such an important part of American history, of the lands of this area. Over 18 million people live in the 41 million acre Chesapeake Bay watershed. Tens of millions of more people visit and explore the region each year. The Chesapeake region is home to so many important cultural and historic sites. And that's what the Gateways program is all about. And those places include spaces related to Indigenous people, free and enslaved Blacks, working family farms, and active watermen and women whose culture and livelihoods really depend on a healthy watershed and a healthy bay. And so the Chesapeake Gateways, the Chesapeake Office for the Park Service really focuses on three main partnerships. We are primarily support and are organized around a congressionally created program called Chesapeake Gateways and Water Trails. It's a partnership network and a community assistance program. And the grants are being offered under that program. We also are a primary partner in the federal multi-state partnership called the Chesapeake Bay Program, which is the 40-year-long running partnership to restore and conserve the Chesapeake and its watershed. And our office also founded and continues to co-convene a large landscape collaborative known as the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, which is striving to conserve 30% of the watershed by 2030. Next slide. The grant that is open right now is being offered under our authorities and our appropriations for the Chesapeake Gateways program. So the Chesapeake Gateways program, nope, go back one slide, please. The Chesapeake Gateways program is focused on places and people and stories with a very purposeful thread on equity and inclusion. This map is just an example of a new brochure that we're working on that will showcase and show the different ways that you can connect with the Chesapeake, both the individual sites, so the gateway sites that are the parks and historic sites and the museums that are all across the watershed that tell a piece of the Chesapeake story, as well. We also are working at a landscape scale. So, you know, people that are in the upper parts of the watershed or the western, far western parts of the watershed might not directly align with the Chesapeake. They align more purposely with their riverways and with their regions. So the upper Susquehanna or the lower James. And so that map is showing that as well. And then another piece that we're beginning to focus around is the idea of Chesapeake Gateway communities. So bringing support at a community scale is something that's coming forward from our office next year and arcing forward. Next slide. And so the authority that we are using for our grants offering is the legislation that created the Gateways program. Again, next year will be the 25th anniversary of the Chesapeake Bay Initiative Act. And this legislation, we consider it our founding enabling legislation, has very broad authorities and really exciting list here in blue of the organizations and entities that we can partner and support. And we are looking in this grant to really activate this full list. Next slide. And so just to frame for folks, every year the Congress appropriates funding for the NPS Chesapeake Gateways program. We're authorized to receive up to $3 million a year. The past 2 years, we have received that full amount, and they get funneled into these three main categories: technical assistance, which includes funding NPS staff and expertise to bring out to partners for support. And then a portion of the funding goes to cooperative and interagency agreements that we set up and fund to, again, bring support out to communities and partners. And this year, the new category is the new competitive grants. So we have originally set aside $1 million for this category. But I'm going to pass it to Eddie to share some exciting news that we're upping that number for this first year. And the grants are really focused on financial assistance to carry out a public purpose. And you'll hear more about that as we go through. So I'll pass it now to one of our key team members. We have a really great team that's helping us both today and during all of our webinars. So I'll just do a thank you to Eddie Gonzalez, who's the director of our partnerships and grants division in our office, to Bob Campbell, who's the head of Chesapeake Gateways Planning and Development. And then our partners that are helping us, Rebecca Stanfield-McCowan, who's the director of the National Park Service Stewardship Institute, and our partner, Brent Mitchell from QLF. So thank you all for helping for this webinar, and I'll pass it to Eddie for the next pieces.
Thank you, Wendy. And yeah, I also will pass on my thanks to everybody that helped get us here. It was a lot of moving pieces, and we're really happy to be able to present this set of grants to you. Before I jump in, I do want to acknowledge that we're going to be presenting a lot. There's a lot of text in these slides. We did structure them so that with the recording and with the slides that you will get, you'll be able to go back and follow at more your pace if you want to use our presentation to help walk you through some of the processes we'll be describing. We want to make sure that you have that available to you. So, don't feel like you have to absorb it all in the span of the next hour and 15 minutes that remain. Everything will get emailed to you, the slides, the links to the recording, as well as a couple of the tools that you'll see mentioned during the presentation. We also recognize that not everybody's going to be ready to submit this year. We're hoping to do two things with this set of grants. One is just to provide financial support and to have you help us identify the needs of where that support can best be invested. But the other part of this is also to make us aware, or make you aware of us as a resource, not just through grants, but other opportunities that you'll see coming out of our office. Some of it on communication guidance, some of it on potentially accessing other grant programs from other agencies. So this is meant to start publicizing us as a resource, the NPS Chesapeake office as a resource to folks, members of the watershed. I also want to go ahead and address a couple of questions that have come up pretty frequently before we get into the nuts and bolts. You do not need to be affiliated with a national park unit, a park or a waterway or a recreation area to apply to these grants. These grants are meant to support organizations, institutions, anybody that is within the Chesapeake Bay perimeter or watershed. Not everything is going to get covered today. I do want to highlight that, oh, no, I jumped ahead. In the chat, I'm putting a link to the overview, which we did last month. That's the webinar where we went a lot more in depth into the criteria, the parameters of the themes that we'll be looking for. So today is going to be a lot more of the mechanics of submitting an application. If you want to get a little more discussion on the kinds of projects we're hoping to see, please go back to the grants overview that we presented last month, and a lot of that will be filled in. So where I want to start, though, is by highlighting this grants webpage that we've created for these network grants. It's really your one-stop place to get started, to orient you to the criteria, to the different parameters that we're putting forward in the application. And then from here, if you scroll to the bottom of that page, get my cursor back, you'll see some boxes that hot link you to other resources. The first box is the actual application. If you click that, it would take you to grants.gov. The next box is going to be really important because it's a running list of all the questions that have come up in the various different webinars we've held and the different discussions, presentations where we've presented on these grants. So, definitely take a look at that. It's pretty lengthy, so there's a lot of questions there that we've already covered. And then we'll be adding another round of answers based on Tuesday and today's webinars. That's a good time to just remind everybody, if questions come up as we're presenting, definitely log them in the chat. That's how we'll be recording what questions that we need to respond to. As we can, we'll take some time to answer them during the presentation. But otherwise, we will be adding them to the FAQ, and you'll see them linked in that box. The network chats box is the link to our YouTube playlist that has all our past recordings. So you can always go back and look at any past content. And then in addition to this About Us, which just takes you back to the main NPS Chesapeake page, there's an additional box that I'll mention in a second that you'll see now. That's our checklist for the program. So a lot of resources for you to utilize on this grants landing page. Also, for folks that haven't been on any other webinars, I did just want to summarize some of the things that Wendy started alluding to about what we're offering. So this covers just a very superficial view of what's more detailed in the application and in our landing page. As Wendy mentioned, we initially had started out with a $1 million allocation for these first year of grants, but because of some carryover funds, it looks like we might be closer to the 2 million mark for this first year. Really exciting. That means it's almost double the amount of grants that we're expecting to support, but it also really gives us a lot more to work with as far as identifying these great opportunities to invest that you're going to bring to us. Two levels that we're still looking at to really manage workflows and the scope and scale of what the projects that we're looking to fund. So the small grant category would be in the 25 to 50,000, and then large grants basically over 50,000 to 150,000. But that is our range, 25,000 at the bottom to 150,000 at the top. Any project within those two funding levels should be able to be addressed within this set of grants. We're also offering them in two grant categories that are fairly broad, and the landing page and the application goes through a lot more detail about these. But just for your reference, one is inclusive interpretive initiatives. So anything that's expanding stories that are being told, who's telling them, who's hearing them, would all fit into that category. And the second one is resilient communities and landscapes. Now, resilience to us is not just climate resilience. It's really a community's ability to be resilient in the face of any number of challenges. So you could fit in community engagement efforts, community roundtables, community planning projects, any project that's helping a community become more resilient to challenges that they're facing, all the way through not just the planning, but implementing some actions that communities can utilize to enhance and reinforce that resilience. So landscape level projects to thematic projects to audience-based projects. Between these two, we really see a lot of the types of relationships and projects we've seen in the past fitting within one of those two. The next piece to emphasize is that this we are looking to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and community engagement through these grants. You'll hear me reference the fact that these are investments we're looking to make. We want you to tell us where investments are needed, but we also want to be able to prioritize projects that have these components in mind. It is a fairly still lengthy list of these parameters, so really you shouldn't have any difficulty equating your project to one of these aspects in looking for support from us. The other awesome thing to highlight is that there is no match requirement going into this program. The money that you need is the money you're going to be able to request, and it's the money that we're going to hopefully be able to fund. There will be some, as part of the review committee, some discernment on potentially breaking up some scopes and amending some of the grant amounts, but really we want you to let us know what you need, and that's what the review committee will be considering as far as what we want to provide. You don't have to worry about any external funding, needing to find any external funding by eliminating that match requirement. So we're hoping that allows a lot more of you that have had barriers in the past to really pursue this as an opportunity. The next thing is eligibility. You'll see on the landing page and on the application, it is a really long list of eligible entities. Pretty much everybody except individuals and the federal agencies are eligible. So that's universities, community organizations, schools, religious organizations, municipalities, state organizations. Anything below that federal agency and above a specific individual would likely be eligible. Really, the only caveat that starts getting into the criteria is that it has to have a public purpose, and I'll mention that more in a second, and that it has to occur within the Chesapeake watershed, both in audience and in activity. Applicants from outside the watershed can apply, but the work and the participants have to reside within the boundaries of the watershed. We also know that for a lot of folks, this is going to be a new endeavor for you. We want to make this as easy as possible, knowing what the processes that are involved in applying for government money. But to help you, we've put in a pretty lengthy application period. So the deadline's not until January 30th. And we're hoping by getting you started now, we can help you get through as much of the ground level work that you need to do to get to the application phase. And all of this is provided in a lot more detail in the grant landing page that I mentioned. All right, so just to get us all on the same page, the vehicle that we're using to provide this financial assistance is a grant. And I mention that because some of you might have been partnering with us through cooperative agreements or through other different types of partnerships. But a grant agreement to the federal government means something very specific. It is a legal document, so we have to go through all the due diligence to set up the grant agreement. And it's a legal document between the National Park Service and some non-federal entity. It is meant to carry out a public purpose, and it is not meant to have heavy involvement from the Park Service as the funding agency. You submit the application, it gets reviewed on its merits, award letters get given out, and then you're given liberty to implement everything that you put into the project based on the funding that you submitted for. We'll be here to guide as far as reporting and any of the administrative requirements that you will have, but we are going to be looking for those projects where the investment is and the work is done at the applicant level. So what is a public purpose then with that part of the caveat? Public purpose really means something that's into a product or a program or a deliverable that's meant to benefit the general public or some segment of the general public. There has to be some public benefit to what you're asking for us to support. The benefactor can't just be the applying organization or even your federal partner. The public has to be worked in there in some way. The example I've been giving is, say you've got a collection of artifacts that you've acquired that are in dire need of preservation and protection. Otherwise, they're in jeopardy of disintegrating. You could submit for funding to provide for some of that preservation and protection, so long as the intention is to make then those artifacts available through public programming or as visitor center artifacts. If it's really just meant for preservation for long-term storage, that's probably not going to be something that would compete well because that public purpose would be missing in that example. But otherwise, a lot of what we've been hearing about should be things that fall well within this public purpose area. Another thing that we do recognize, there are some challenges to applying for government funds, navigating the websites, navigating all the different steps you need to follow, navigating all the pieces that you need to have assembled. So we want to make this as easy for you as possible. Our goal is to get more applications. As much as my review committee is going to wince at that, you are expressing need to us, and we're in a position to want to know what those needs are. We have had internal discussions along the lines of, regardless of who gets granted and who does not, all of these represent needs within the watershed. So they should make our radar in some form, whether we might follow up with technical assistance or connecting you to other resources. Your ability to convey these needs to us is going to be just as important as whether they are successfully make them get through the funding review process. So to help you though, we have organized a checklist that will walk you through all the different components from the pre-application phase, really asking you to spend some time doing that eligibility review. We would really hate to see a proposal come in and get kicked out of review because it was not eligible. So go through that eligibility review steps, and then just the mechanics of logging into Grants.gov, which I'll explain more in a second, and then the actual components, breaking it down by the different components of the application that you'll come across as you're in Grants.gov. And then finally, the review criteria. We're trying to be as specific as possible so that you really shouldn't have any questions about what to include in your narrative, what to include as part of your application process. If you go to the landing page at ChesapeakeGrants.gov, you will see the box at the bottom with a link to the checklist. I do want to emphasize that the checklist is not part of your application. Please do not submit it as part of your application. There is nothing in the checklist to review, and it'll actually count against your 8-page limit if it is included. So do not include your checklist. It's really meant as a tool for you to utilize to organize your steps in the application. All right. For some of you, you've already done this. Maybe this is a chance to go check a couple of emails, grab a coffee, refresh yourself. I'm going to walk through the system for award management section to get you to the unique identity identifier. This is a pre-application activity that you need to do. Everybody that's going to be applying through grants.gov, and unfortunately, everybody has to apply through grants.gov. We don't have an ability to take proposals electronically or in paper fashion. So because of this, we know that just getting into grants.gov is going to be new to some folks. The first step is to get a unique identity identifier. This all goes back to the fact that these are legal documents. The federal government is going to be providing financial support to you as an entity. So there's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen to ensure that you are somebody the federal government can give money to beyond the eligibility criteria that we're putting out there. So I'm going to walk through, it's going to be very much in the weeds. I did this with a fictional organization so that I could understand exactly the steps that are involved. I did it all in one day, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what it took to get that done. The good thing is you'll start with at the System of Award Management website, you'll need to create an account to get started and a login. The federal government has combined the login for SAM with a universal login portal called login.gov. If you start at SAM, it'll kick you over to login.gov, or you can start at login.gov and create your account first and then jump over to SAM. Either way, your first step is going to be to create an account. All that is you're creating a username, password, a way to access these things automatically or through that login. If you've used other logins in the past, once you log in here, it'll connect you to your past SAM.gov entity or accounts that you might have had. Once you log into SAM.gov through that account login, you're going to get this workspace. It's the main dashboard that you would use to start. And what you're going to be doing is this bottom left, register your entity to get a unique identity. Again, you're going through the steps to prove that you are an entity that is able to receive government money. And that's really all this process is trying to confirm. So you can see I did this, I went through all these steps myself to get a sense of what's involved. From that get started, you're going to come to this menu. You're going to be choosing, for the most part, register for financial assistance only. I'm only going to be walking it through with the intention of you being able to get a grant. The second category, register for all awards, would be if you're also looking to go after contracting, if you've got a part of your organization that's involved in government procurement. There's a lot more steps involved on the contracting side. So for our purposes, we're only going to walk through the financial assistance steps, which provide just minimal documentation that you need to provide. As you're going, all of these are step by step, and there's a lot of confirmations that you'll be asked to acknowledge as we go. One of the first choices, are you registering as a government entity? I was registering a fictional organization, so I'm including saying no. If you're saying yes, all it does is classify you within the system differently, but you're still asked for the same information. So continue to follow along. As I'm hitting next, in the actual site, it's taking me to all the follow on pages. Here, it's to confirming this is what I'm pursuing, a business type organization or organization for financial awards. Now it's asking me to get ready to prepare my documentation. That the next step is going to be that there'll be some documents that I'll have to upload. There is a checklist that'll be linked in our checklist that preps you for the kind of documentation that you will need. But this is basically what you're going to be asked to validate: your legal name, your address, your start year, all the things that are specific to your entity that would allow them to verify that you're an eligible entity for disbursement. Fill in your information to access the log. This is the fictional organization that I was using to walk through. So you'll see it's pretty standard as far as contact information. When you get to this page, there's a database that's behind all of this that's housing all of this entity information. The first thing it's going to do is to see if you're already in the system in some form. So you'll get two choices here. There'll be a drop-down list where, based on your name and your address, it's going to see if there's anything that comes close in case something might have changed. If you do see yourself on here, you would click on it and advance from there. If you don't, you're going to say, I don't recognize myself, so that you can create a new entry. If you are already on here and everything is accurate, you'll go right into requesting a UEI. I was doing this new so I could go through the steps. So I did. I do not recognize myself. I had to start inputting information relevant to my organization. Of course, this is made up for me, but for you, it would be your start year and your place of incorporation. And then it just tabulates everything and makes it available to you to confirm. And then now you're having to document what you just inputted. If you were already in the system and you found yourself and there was nothing to update, you would end up here as well to upload your documentation so that it's logged in there. Now, if you've already gone through this process within the last year, you won't need to do this document verification. You'll just go right to the request the UEI from that step. But for everybody else, you'll have this additional documentation step. I put this on here, so if you didn't, you would have started with this screen, found your name, clicked on it, and then moved into the to attaching the documentation. So back to this one, you'd click Add a Document. A pop-up screen comes up where you're given the choice of the different types of documents that they will accept. Again, that is on that SAM.gov checklist. That's on our checklist, those different options. But you would choose the one that's the most convenient for you to access. For mine, I chose an EI. So I also did this in real life with an organization that I've worked with in the past. And I used the EIN tax notification that we got from the IRS that had our address listed on there. So I did go through this as well with a real organization to actually provide that input. And then you verify what that documentation is documenting once you upload it. And then you hit submit and you get a file number. At this point, you're in the system as a request. And then you'll get an email that will verify this reference number, and you'll start an exchange with the interactive system on all the things that you'll need to do next. Because I was changing an address when I went through it with the real organization I tested, I eventually got a notification that my address change was accepted, but I had to go back in and redo the exact same process of finding my entity, picking it, and moving through it, this time without any changes. And I ended with requesting the UEI. The good thing is at this point, it was all through an engagement with the system. I got an email. It asked me to log in to my workspace. So while you're waiting, you log into your workspace, you'll see this pending ID assignment. There's two in there, the fake one that I've created and then the real one. For me, the fake one will go away because I won't respond to it. The real one is the one that will eventually lead to me getting a UEI. So from there, it may seem like a lot. I know as you're following through, unless you're actually typing these things in, it seems hard to keep up on. But that's why we're recording this, why it's captured in the slides. Takes them a day to just sit down, work with the site, and follow these steps through. These aren't our sites, so I do want to highlight that we can't really speak to the turnaround times. I don't know what causes one process to go faster than another. Some of these, I did mine on Sunday. I got my notification Tuesday evening, and I was able to add in the information that they asked for yesterday. Now I'm waiting for the next confirmation that they've received the next phase that they've asked for. The point is, get started early. There are opportunities to get help in SAM.gov. So from that dashboard, there's a help section, and it takes you to these options. You can go to the Federal Service Desk, I believe it was called. to get any assistance with your actual account, but you really, unfortunately, need to pursue their help options since it's their system to get you through that UEI process. Once you're there, you're able to come back to our grants landing page, hit that apply for assistance button, and that takes you to Grants.gov, where you can access the actual application. From here, you're in the portal that will allow you to do actually submit the application through that apply. They do make you re-log in because you're in another system. Even though it's a single login, you're still going to be using the login that you created in login.gov, but you do need to log in because that'll then attach your login to your UEI and shows that you are able to pursue an application. You'd hit the apply button and can get started. You can also just go to the main grants.gov page as listed at the very top and search in the top right search window, either by our name, National Park Service Chesapeake Gateway Grants, or by our grant code P23AS00041. All of those will get you to this page, or just go back to our grant landing page and use our hyperlink to that.
So, Eddie, I think I might pause us for a moment as we start to switch gears and just, there's been a lot of questions in the chat about eligibility in terms of location and types of things that would be eligible to be funded. I'm seeing one that it has popped up now a couple times about general operating costs and what is appropriate and not appropriate for funding for this. So Wendy, Bob, or Eddie, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I just went and pulled the language from the grant announcement itself, and the statement in the grant announcement, and I'll put it in the chat, reads that this grant program is not designed to support annual maintenance or operations. So, you know, that's sort of the grounding positioning. So it, you know, general operating costs are not intended to be what's covered through these grants.
Yeah, Bob will go more detail, but you will have the ability to put in indirect and a fringe for staff. You are able to put staff, but it really needs to be project or related to the project or program that you're looking to get support for. I also see a question about, oh, I just lost it. County government. I would definitely, the way they were wording it, put that on the government side and then follow through your registration that way. I think it's, you know, any government versus any non-government. And since it doesn't include federal for us, it wouldn't be federal applicants clicking that.
And Eddie, could you speak to, this was in our previous round of webinars about groups being careful not to, that there are organizations out there that try to get folks to like pay them to register, and just share a little bit of
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, no, it's something very important to highlight, because you may be approached by folks, third-party consultants that do this for as a business, and you do not need to pay for any part of this. It's all navigating the websites themselves and going through the steps, but there's no fees associated with getting a UEI, getting the login. Obviously it's your budgets, and depending on your capacity, there are groups out there that can do this for you. But some of it can get predatory, is from what we've heard. So just be cautious of that, you will never hear us telling you, you have to go pay somebody to get yourself enrolled or registered for any of these processes. And, there are, as Brent Mitchell's highlighting, a lot of it ends up being more on the scam side than on, folks really trying to do this as a legitimate business venture. So be careful of that, but you shouldn't need it. Okay, I haven't scrolled through all the questions. Are there a couple of other ones to hit up real quick?
Would supporting college, university programs be considered a public group?
College and universities are certainly an eligible applicant category, if the program is a college or university program, is that inherently public purpose?
I would think the student body would classify as a segment of the public versus the university itself or the department. That the program has to utilize programming in some way. It's not trying to think of an analogous example. You can't just get funding to create a ecology lab, and that's the extent of the funding you're looking for. Is you want to buy all new equipment to totally refurbish an ecology lab, but you could ask for funding to support getting things for an ecology lab that will allow you to do certain activities with certain population of students. I guess is how I would create that analogy.
Mm-hmm. All right, and some good advice in there about how to avoid scammers.
There's likely, if you go to the FAQ that has already been assembled, I think it's up to like 4 or 5 pages. So there is a lot captured there. Definitely feel free to take a look. And if something does is not there, there'll be an email address I'll show you at the end that you can use to contact us if it doesn't come up on this call.
All right, I think we can move on. Folks
Awesome.
Can keep popping questions in the chat and we'll be doing our best to answer them as we go.
Great. No, I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for keeping those questions coming. I'm kind of through the mechanics of the piece that I was looking at. I just wanted to then close with this reminder that driving all of this is that unique login that you create that gets you access. And again, because it is not our system, if you need assistance with the login portion of it, there is a help desk that you can utilize to get that assistance. All right, now we're going to do a little transition from the weeds that I was talking about to, you've crossed over into grants.gov, you've logged in, you've seen that main landing page, you're ready to really start putting everything together. The next part of this is to walk you through some of the pieces that you'll have to access in the application and some of the information that you'll need to have gathered or have really calculated to help you fill out those forms. So to do that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Bob Campbell.
Okay, folks. So a couple things just to start with. One is just to make the point that really one of the main things that we're trying to do today is to help connect the dots among some of these different components and to help you go into the task of developing an application with a sense of the big picture and how different components of the application relate to one another, how some are going to be out front. You need to get this done front. Others are by design going to be better approached as you've developed your work to your product to some more greater degree. Really, Eddie has been through a fairly meticulous sort of a presentation about the SAM registration. Again, one of the things that unfortunately we have to acknowledge is that we would be motivated to make this process as easy for you as we possibly can. But we work within boundaries, just as you will have to work within boundaries. So once you have SAM, have conquered SAM and gotten yourself a UEI, you're in a good place because you can't get past the first half page of the federal application before they're going to ask you for the UEI. You're also going to have to navigate your way through grants.gov for submitting your application. When you're successful and are receiving your grant, there's still some more programs that you'll get to work with, which is ASAP, Automated System of Award Payment, and Grant Solutions. Those are with us, where they're prescribed for you. So the point is to just be nimble and get started on some of the things that Eddie has suggested up front. And now what I want to do is just to delve into the the application, the submission package a bit. Now, before I do that, again, I'm going to emphasize that the controlling document, the most complete explanation for this is the notice of funding opportunity, which Eddie directed to you at the very beginning. So this listing right here, the contents and form of the application submission, is taken from that. All of these components are important. They're equally important. There's no making choices about them. They all need to be addressed. For the purposes of our discussion over the next little piece of time, I'm highlighting some because how they are addressed in the application might suggest that they're of lesser importance, but they are not, right? So I've highlighted here the importance of the detailed budget, which in the document it's going to say the detailed budget has to include this information on all cost categories and must clearly identify all project costs. It's also the case that there is no prescribed format for a detailed budget. There is nothing given to you that says you have to use this form, like there is a standard form SF424 application for federal assistance. There is a standard form SF424A that's used for non-construction programs, or SF424C that's used for construction programs. The abstract summary is a prescribed format and expectation for it. But some of these other ones, I just want to decrypt for you a little bit if I can, to help you put your best foot forward on that. The same is going to be true of the project narrative. And so Eddie, if you go to the next slide, we'll start burrowing in on that a bit. So again, in the notice of funding opportunity, it talks about the narrative it is limited to no longer than 8 pages. And so you need to make those strong 8 pages, really sell your project, and sell the ability of your team to make the project successful. And so, you know, this is you're probably reading along with me here, says the 8-page limit includes all the text, figures, and reference. But then it also makes it clear that those standard forms, the SF424 and A and B, et cetera, those don't count against the limit. And later on, there's a clarification that resumes and things like that don't count against the limit. But there is a caution not to be frivolous about those 8 pages with extra information. But what I want to do is to emphasize to you that information that clarifies your project tasks, who and how and when the task will be completed. That's not going to be extra information. That is really what's going to help the review panel understand that you've thought about your project, not just as a proposal, but as something that you expect to be successfully funded and are prepared to successfully implement. So those are going to, that's the value that I'm trying to emphasize for you. Next slide, please, Eddie. So this makes it a little bit more specific about the components of the project narrative. And again, the red highlights are my emphasis for the purposes of this presentation. Though these highlights are not there in the NOFO. The NOFO treats all of these components equally because they're all critical. But again, the point of you're putting your best foot forward in describing your purpose, your goals, your objectives, the specific deliverables that your project will achieve and can be provided at the end are important, because ultimately a grant award will be for an amount of money for a specific set of deliverables. and you need to be clear about what those are, and be clear in your own mind, because that will be the standard of accomplishment. This also talks about the key tasks and milestones, which in the context of your project narrative will help to represent that you've thought through the process of development in your project, through the process of implementation. Most of you will have ever heard the terminology, sort of a critical path of tasks in any sort of project. There's not just start, finish, and miracle happens here in the middle. The key tasks are the ones that are going to help convey that you've thought through what is going to be necessary step by step to get where you're going. And the milestones will represent the order of magnitude of time and when you expect to be moving through these various stages to an endpoint. And to that endpoint will be how you will have justified how much time you are going to ask for your project. And you'll notice in the notice of funding opportunity again that it's going to say generally projects are expected to be completed within 12 months, but that you can have longer for that if your justification is in place for why more time is going to be needed. These key tasks and milestones will help to make that represent that need for you. So you can see the other things. Eddie's already talked about the representation of the strategic intent, but here again, let me bring your attention down here to the highlights again that talk about project team skills and experience. So within your organization, within your cadre of volunteers, perhaps you will actually partner with another organization to do a project together and propose to do that. The point here is to understand how you are going to assemble the skills necessary to accomplish the work. And you know, the point of proposed partners again would be most importantly as a rationale for bringing again the capacity and the skills that other organizations can share with you to the best success of the project. So here's the thing just to understand. Down here at the bottom of the page, it talks about optional narrative components that do not count against the 8-page limit. And it makes a point about project resumes and letters of support. And so you could have a tendency to want to include those, you know, gratuitously because they're not going to count. We'll just put those in there. But a resume will matter if it's been made clear that the person on your staff or that's going to volunteer their time or is going to come from another partner organization is going to have a specific assignment that is going to need to be representative. Let's make an easy example of it. A cartographer, because you're going to need to produce a map, in which case, you know, the resume can substantiate the claim for their skills, but don't leave it to the resume alone. Make sure that you're connecting that resume to a person that's been named as having a role and responsibility. The same is true for letters of support in some ways. So, you know, a letter of support from your district representative or your mayor or something will be helpful, will be important, but they're not necessarily as critical to making the case for your capacity and your readiness as the letter of commitment from a volunteer or from an organization that's going to donate materials for your project. So if they are making a material contribution in time or supplies or expertise, then those are the folks that it would be good to have have a letter, an email. It doesn't have to be much, but just something that says where they stand up and say, I count on me, right? Those are going to be the most critical things for you. Next slide, please, Eddie. The project abstract. This one is a strange little component of the application package, because it's really asking you as an organization to write your own press statement. When you develop a project abstract, the intended use for it is if and when you are successful and receive the award, that your project abstract in your language describes to be posted on USA Spending what your project is going to accomplish. The bold language up here emphasizes that you're going to have 4,000 characters in your abstract to describe the purpose, activities, deliverables, and outcomes, and beneficiaries. So again, connecting the dots, think about the beneficiaries as having a relationship to how you can conceptualize or envision your project purpose. So a project purpose is for public benefit. That means you would be describing who is it that is receiving the benefit of what your grant is going to produce. So again, I just think of this as like a pyramid, right? Like up here at the top is this narrative, this abstract. You've got 4,000 characters to describe your project so that it can be shared on USA Spending across all agencies of government, so that there is visibility on where federal tax dollars are being spent. That's what this is about. 4,000 characters, but underpinning that is your 8 pages of strong narrative for your project. And then below that is some work that I want to describe to you as important as well. So actually, I'm going to take a moment to screen share here for you folks, and that's let me show. I'm getting there. So hopefully you are seeing this text here, and on the very top of the page is project title. Use same title consistently throughout your application package. Everybody seeing that?
We see that.
Okay, thank you. That's just an admonition, right? So on your application, it's going to ask what's the name of your project. Go on and make up your mind what you're going to call it, and use that reference consistently, just so it doesn't get confusing about what you're trying to do. And I'm not trying to suggest that you look at all these words. I am just going to show that again, different organizations, when they're confronted with the challenge of thinking about the project purpose and the deliverables and the key tasks and the timeline, those things take different approach to it. Sometimes you just got to commit it to paper so that you know what you're about. So in this example, they've there's a narration, a project overview of what it is the project is going to do. And then here, for the purposes of example, I'm just showing that their project had three components, major components, including one that's fundamentally about getting a good start and developing the right kind of partnership. And so that is described as a component of the project. And then they've actually called out specific deliverables to it. Now some of you might have a project in mind that's not really multifaceted. It's got something you want to do. It may not be any more complicated than that. You might stop right here. But we're going to have small organizations that want to do big projects and big organizations that want to do small. There is no such thing as one size fits all. So I'm going to attempt to just show you some examples, and you will have your own challenge of thinking through what's the best way to present your information. But again, for the purposes of this example, they had a second component, again, which is described with its own specific deliverables, and likewise for the third component. So they've provided great clarity about what the deliverables of their project are. And in actually further developing that, they began to think about, well, what are the tasks that get me through, for example, as you see here, the process of partnership development, and breaking it down. Who are the partners? What's the agenda going to be for a good steering committee meeting when we have them get together? So you can see how that works, and they're thinking through what's the task, what's the product or the result to it. Not yet necessarily the same as deliverables. Perhaps it is each its own deliverable, but certainly sort of a milestone in that they need to get to. And then they can start to specify who actually is going to work on that. Now, to mix my metaphors, this would be the place where you might call out, we need a cartographer on this task. And so your cartographer is there, and you're connecting the dots with their resume in there. And then the completion dates. And really the point of this is just to show that this is how you're going to get to the point where you know what the milestones are, because you've thought through what the steps, the many steps that may be necessary to get your project done. And once you've timelined this out with the dates associated to those, you have a vision of what the end date is. So as you would be looking at this, you would see, all right, well, we're going to get started in June 2022, and we're going to be having our last things are going to be coming due in March of 2023. So now they've clarified for themselves how long the project is going to take, and you can make those connections to that. So that's all for that. And I'll ask Eddie if you can help me get back to the slides. We'll keep moving. And here we go. We'll go back just one, right? So we'll spend just a moment with this. So again, here's another circumstance where I can use the metaphor of a pyramid for you. On the standard form SF424, which is the federal application, one of the questions is, how much money are you asking for from the federal government, the National Park Service in this instance? And let's, for purposes of illustration, let's assume your answer is $45,000. That's what we're going to ask for. So that's the top of the pyramid, $45,000. Easy answer to provide, but the devil's in the details, right? So underneath that is this standard form SF424A, which is the one that I'll show you for illustration. I realize some of you may be proposing construction projects, but I'm thinking that the majority will probably not be construction projects. So we'll use the A for illustration. What it's going to ask you to do is to break down that $45,000 and give us some sense about whether there are multiple components to your project, such as the example that I just gave you, where they showed that there were 3 different components, or to create another example. Suppose you're going to work on an interpretive project. You're thinking you're going to make a run at that inclusive interpretation. And so you're going to be working with 3 different components of your project. One of them will be some master planning. The second component will be the development of scripts. And then the third component will be the delivery of those programs. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you with the SF424A how it'll ask you to break out those components. and how it's also going to ask you to identify and break down the costs by the various cost categories. So we've had questions about, can it include personnel? It can include personnel. If it's going to include salaries, it's also going to ask that you break out separately the fringe. So if there are benefit calculations in the salaries that you pay, it asks for those to be separated out. That's a separate category. Just like travel would be its own category, or supplies would be a category, or contracts that you would write will be a category. So we're going to take you through those, just a look at those documents. And then here's the chance again to emphasize for detailed budget that we'll spend a little bit more time with this in a moment, because it says here about unit costs shall be provided for all budget items, including the cost of work for contractors or partners or subrecipients. And then this thing that's at the very bottom there, it says there's no uniform format dictated for the detailed budget. So I'm going to show you some examples, but I have to caveat it up front that these are not a prescribed format. They are not a specific format that you have to use for providing that. Might be frustrating for us. That's the good news, is you can develop your detailed budget so that it says exactly what you need it to say without having to do any more. But the bad news is you have to do that. But I am going to emphasize some of the things that are going to be important to include in there. Now, the detailed budget becomes important again for the review panel that's going to be looking at your project submission, and they want to have an understanding not only what it is that you're proposing to do, but that your organization is stepping forward in a good professional manner and is ready to make the project successful. And when a grant is made, what you're going to be you will be awarded is defined by several things: the amount of money that's obligated to you for your project, the period of time that you ask to have available to you to complete it, and the deliverables that you're going to provide, and that you have, that you're able to do it on time and within budget. Those are the expectations upon award. And so your review panel, and these folks are going to be reviewing your proposal, and what they will know about it is what you tell them. And they don't necessarily know your organization. They probably don't know your project. They just have to have a sense, once they finish reading it, that you got a good project and you're ready to make it happen successfully. Okay, so now let me do a little screen sharing again here, just to hit the high points on some of these things. So this so hopefully what you're seeing is this thing with this that's titled Budget Information Non-Construction Programs. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'm not going to fill this out all the way, but I'm going to put in enough so that you can see what I mean about how it asks you to break it down, and it will actually work with you, if you will. Most of these standard forms are fillable PDFs. And so you can just go right in there and do it. So remember, for that example, I was thinking you're going to do master interpretive planning. That's going to be one component of your project. And then you're going to do script development, where you're going to really figure out exactly what you want to say in the programs that you are going to deliver, so that all your docents or your staff can do that effectively. And then you're going to have program delivery. So those are going to be in there. Forgive my spelling. We'll worry about that later. And then you're gonna you will have developed your detailed budget. We'll get to the bottom of the pyramid in just a moment. This is above that. And you're asking for new funds. And so you might be asking for $15,000 for each of these components of your project. And this document then starts to aggregate the information that your input. And there it is. There's the $45,000 that you're going to ask for on the federal application. And you've already named the different components of your project. By the time you get to page 2, it's bringing over your components of your projects. And here's where it's going to ask you to start breaking down your costs. And here's where you would be able to go in there and say, we're going to need to spend $5,000 on personnel. And that's going to carry with it, $500 for fringe benefit. And then there's going to also be $250 for travel. And we're gonna do a contract for someone to help us with that interpretive plan, an interpretive planner, and we're going to need $5,000 there. So you see that was, I just turned it into 50. Oops. But anyway, all I want to do here was just to show you how it starts to build out your budget for you as you're putting in this information. Hopefully, if this has no value other than just to not make you afraid of the SF424 when you have to fill it out, that's what we're really after today. And then the next thing that's going to come is this. Now, we are not requiring a match, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when you are developing your project, that you might need to bring other dollars to accomplish the full project that you want to do. You as the applicant organization may have some money in there, or you might have also gotten some funds from a state award or something that you're going to match. You would bring those in this section, the SF424A. And then this one about forecasted cash needs, you can default to just taking that $45,000 and breaking it out over the quarter. Or maybe you think to yourself, well, it'll start off a little bit slow until we've created, gotten our RFP written and retained our consultant. So it'll be 5,000, and then it's going to start picking up steam in the second quarter, and then it's going to really be picking up, really rolling by the time we get to the third and fourth quarter, and it's going to take us there. Or as a different example for what this is worth, this will, bear with me, this one's just a little confusing, so I want to show you how it's different. Now you've spent out 4 quarters and you've only spent $40,000. Well, that's because when you were thinking about how long you needed for your project, you thought, I don't just need a year, we're going to need 14 months to actually get to conclusion. And so we still have another 5,000 that we'll spend in those last couple of months. When you get down to here and it's asking for future funding periods, like in the second year, that's where you would account for those last dollars. Anyway, that's the whole show for this one. Again, is just to get you familiarized with it, so you won't fear it when you get there. And now I'm gonna pull up this document, which is again, it's a guidance document only, and we're gonna make this available to you. It's just gonna help you understand what it means to provide the basis of the costs that you're asking for in your proposal. So again, for example, a position, a staff member that's going to work on this, your cartographer, or your chief of interpretation or something. The basic formula for cost basis is the units and the cost per unit. So in the case of staff, their salary, right, which you might express in hours or weeks that they're going to be on the task, or years. number of, the times, number of units, unit costs gives you the cost, and you'd be able to break that out for each of the positions. And then, as I noted before, fringe is separated out. So again, it's like, the fringe is predicated perhaps on a percentage base of that. So be prepared to answer the question about the basis of those costs. Many of you will have had a lot of experience dealing with travel, and that's, again, but it's not just, well, we need $2,000 for travel. You're going to need to be more specific than that, because, is it going to be predicated on certain trips to certain destinations? Is there a mileage, calculation to how far it is to get there? Those things will ultimately need to be spelled out, certainly before an award can be made, because the awarding officer has to be able to determine that the costs that you are asking for are all reasonable as judged by the justification that you provide. So again, this document will just help you pick out what it is. Supplies, 100 copies at 5 cents a piece. Same if you're getting to a contract, right? If you're gonna hire somebody to do the work, you're just gonna have to make some estimation of the number of hours and of an hourly cost. Like if you are someone who's going to be working on a construction project, you might be turning, say, to an engineer to ask for some sense of order of magnitude of costs, or maybe you'll turn to your engineer that's on municipal staff to help you figure out whether that cost is there. Those are the kinds of narratives that you can include to help justify your costs. And my second example is just to again just use one that has done this a little bit. Now again, the detailed budget there is no prescribed format, but I'm gonna encourage you to understand it's relatively easy just to begin with a blank Excel spreadsheet and build what you need for your purposes. So I've borrowed one here to use. And again, the admonition, be consistent about your title, right? And then here's where they have as they've constructed this budget, it allowed them to understand what the aggregated costs were for each of those cost categories that they have to supply on the SF424A for personnel, fringe, travel, contractual, and even indirect. Well, again, this is consistent with the example we've used a few times. For this example, they have different components of their project. And so they figured out who is it that's working on the first piece of this project? How much time are they spending? What are their costs? What are the fringe rates in here? And here, just for example, I'm showing you that you can just embed the explanation for your costs just as a note within your Excel spreadsheet, or just here, it just says there's an attachment that explains, because our organization has an explanation of our fringe that's already done and we can provide.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
I just want to jump in for a sec, because there's a question that came in the chat that Eddie and I actually answered differently. So we're hoping you have the definitive answer. There was
okay, wait, before you even go, everybody, the definitive answer will be in the frequently asked questions, because that's where we will have the time to take the discipline to answer it comprehensively for you. Please rely on the FAQs. But now proceed, Wendy.
Yeah, well, so there was a question about if there's construction. It says, can this be for design and construction? Would you use both 42A and 42C, or just one or the other? Design and construction.
yes, it's quite possible that we would use both of them. If your construction is done at all in-house and you're trying to, break down costs, say you're a municipality, you will use a SF 424C for a construction budget. But if you do it just with a contract, if you just contract for the construction, you can actually still use the A. So for the easy answer for most of you is expect that you will use the SF 424A. And if you could give us a good, clean SF 424A that's backed up with a detailed budget, and the review panel can assess whether or not your costs look aligned with your project and look reasonable, it's going to be fine. It's going to grade well. And once we get to the point where we're negotiating the award, then if there's any cleanup of the budget, most of that is actually will be done based on your having to answer questions that the awarding officer may have, and they tend to be needing clarification of the nature of what I'm trying to coach you to be prepared to provide.
All right, great. That's helpful. So we're coming up on 5:30, so I just want to do a little.
So I got to hurry. Well, I've shared what I have to share on that, and so we can rip through the last few slides here and get pretty close to the finish line on time. So again, allow yourself time to think about your project, not from your own perspective, but from the perspective of a review panel, again, that will know what you tell them. And they're going to be assessing it against these criteria, assigning points for it as you see here. And again, note these 15% for clarity of operational plan and 15% for capacity to implement the project. I've called those out so that they don't get lost in your zeal to address the other ones. Next slide, please. So we're wrapping up this round of workshops that we're doing, and you'll have until the end of January for submitting your application. We're trying to understand that you may want to just relax some over the holidays and noodle on it, and then come back ready to let her rip in January. So that's your application deadline. And then it'll take some time for the review panel to go through all the applications, rank these selections to be made. It's important that I emphasize the last thing to you, the project period of performance. When you look at the checklist that Eddie has developed, it's actually going to recommend that you use the date of June 1st, 2023 as your proposed start date, because on the application, it's going to ask you for a date. Right. And so that's the date you should put in there. And then once you've calculated the amount of time that you need for your project, you can decide what your end date needs to be if June 1st is the start date. But the reality is that once the awards are being made, somebody's going to be first and somebody's going to be last, and somebody might get a May 1st start date and somebody else might get a July 31st start date. So the Park Service, once the award is actually concluded, will tell you what the start date is, and will recalibrate to your end date based on that. Okay, that's just because work will take the time that it takes. Next slide, please. There you go. We want to galvanize you on the January 30th application deadline. And we'll be looking forward to hearing from you and reading the great ideas that you have to share.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bob. Thanks, Eddie. These, we'll put in the chat the email address. So we are maintaining this living document that's the FAQ on our landing page. And so if you have questions that you are only going to think about after we end here, send it into Chesapeake_grants at NPS.gov. Also, you know, Bob just ran through that timeline. Put on your own timeline. If you don't have your SAMs and your you know, your number to and your ID to get into grants.gov and start, put that on your timeline for like the Monday after Thanksgiving, right? Like get that done, start that process, and you know, send in questions. We really want to ensure that all the groups that have needs are able to apply. With the additional $1 million that is sort of unexpected for us. We're really excited to support so many more projects than we originally thought we had funds for. So we really need a lot of applications, and just really thankful for everyone sticking with us late on a Thursday. So just end it there, and just wish everyone happy gathering next week with family and friends, and we'll talk with everyone soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.